Have you ever wondered why a continent so rich in resources, culture, and history has faced so much turmoil? From the ancient empires of the Maya and Inca to the vibrant, complex nations of today, Latin America's story is one of dramatic highs and devastating lows. It's a story of conquest, revolution, and a relentless search for identity. Today, we're going to unravel this entire epic saga, explore why the United States has always been so deeply involved, and look at what the future might hold for this incredible region. So buckle up, this is the complete history of Latin America. Before the arrival of Europeans, Latin America was home to magnificent civilizations. In Mesoamerica, the Olmecs, Maya, and later the Aztecs built sprawling cities, developed complex calendars, and created breathtaking art. The Aztecs, centered at their capital Tenochtitlan, where Mexico City now stands, ruled a vast empire through tribute and military power. Further south, along the Andes Mountains, the Inca Empire stretched for thousands of miles, connected by an incredible network of roads. They were master engineers and administrators, managing a diverse population without a written language as we know it, using a system of knotted cords called quipus. These weren't primitive societies. They were advanced, organized, and deeply spiritual worlds unto themselves. Then in 1492, everything changed. Christopher Columbus's arrival kicked off an era of European conquest that would reshape the continent forever. Spanish conquistadors like Hernán Cortés and Francisco Pizarro, driven by ambitions of gold, glory, and God, arrived with steel weapons, horses, and something far more deadly: diseases like smallpox. These diseases wiped out an estimated 90% of the indigenous population, a demographic catastrophe unlike any other in human history. The Aztec and Inca empires, despite their might, crumbled. By the mid-16th century, Spain and Portugal had carved up the continent, imposing their languages, their religion, and the brutal colonial system. For the next 300 years, Latin America was a colonial powerhouse for Europe. A rigid social hierarchy was established, with peninsulares, those born in Spain, at the very top, followed by criollos, who were of European descent but born in the Americas. Below them were mestizos of mixed heritage, indigenous peoples, and enslaved Africans brought over to work on plantations and in mines. This system was designed to extract wealth. Silver from mines in Bolivia and Mexico flowed to Spain, funding its European wars, while sugar, coffee, and tobacco plantations generated immense profits. But this wealth came at an immense human cost, built on the backs of forced and enslaved labor. The seeds of revolution were sown in this inequality. Inspired by the American and French revolutions, and fueled by local grievances, the desire for independence exploded across Latin America in the early 19th century. Figures like Simon Bolivar, known as the Liberator, and José de San Martin led epic military campaigns, freeing country after country from Spanish rule. Bolivar dreamed of a united Gran Colombia, a powerful federation of newly freed states. But this dream quickly shattered. The newly independent nations were politically unstable, economically weak, and geographically divided. Power fell into the hands of caudillos, strong military leaders who often ruled as dictators. The colonial legacy of inequality and resource extraction proved incredibly difficult to shake. This is where the United States enters the picture in a big way. In 1823, President James Monroe issued the Monroe Doctrine, essentially telling European powers to stay out of the Western Hemisphere. It sounded like a protective gesture, but it quickly became a justification for U.S. intervention. Throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, the U.S. exerted its influence through both economic and military means. The concept of manifest destiny fueled expansion, leading to the Mexican-American War and the U.S. annexing vast territories. The Spanish-American War gave the U.S. control of Puerto Rico and Cuba. American companies, like the United Fruit Company, grew so powerful they could topple governments that threatened their interests, leading to the term Banana Republic. The 20th century was a whirlwind of political experiments and turmoil. Many countries saw populist leaders rise to power, promising social reforms and economic independence. But the Cold War turned Latin America into a battleground between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Fearing the spread of communism, the CIA supported coups and installed right-wing military dictatorships in countries like Chile, Argentina, and Brazil. These regimes were brutal, responsible for the disappearance and death of tens of thousands of people during what became known as the Dirty Wars. Simultaneously, leftist guerrilla movements, Inspired by the Cuban Revolution led by Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, fought back, leading to decades of civil war in places like Colombia, Guatemala, and El Salvador. By the 1980s and 90s, a wave of democratization swept across the continent. Military dictatorships fell, and civilian governments were elected. Countries embraced neoliberal economic policies, opening up their markets to global trade. This brought periods of growth but also increased inequality and financial crises. The so-called pink tide followed in the 2000s as a new wave of left-leaning governments came to power in Venezuela, Brazil, Bolivia, and Ecuador. It focused on social programs funded by a commodity boom, lifting millions out of poverty. But reliance on oil and soy prices, coupled with corruption and authoritarian tendencies in some cases, led to new economic and political crises when the boom ended. So, what comes next for Latin America? The region is at a critical crossroads. Today, it faces a complex set of challenges: persistent inequality, political polarization, organized crime, and the growing impacts of climate change. The relationship with the United States is also evolving. While the U.S. remains a dominant economic and political partner, China has emerged as a major player, investing billions in infrastructure and becoming a top trading partner for many nations. This gives Latin American countries more leverage and options than ever before. The future will likely be defined by how the region tackles these issues. Can its democracies become more resilient and less polarized? Can its economies diversify away from raw material exports and create more sustainable, inclusive growth? And can it find its own path forward, navigating the competing interests of global superpowers? The story of Latin America is far from over. It remains a continent of incredible potential, with a young, dynamic population and a rich cultural heritage that continues to influence the world. Its history of struggle has also created a deep-seated resilience and a constant drive for a better future. The next chapter is being written right now, and the world will be watching. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through Latin American history. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives, and let me know in the comments which part of this history you'd like to see a full video on. See you next time.